Zelenskyy, the president of Ukraine, has said that Ukrainian troops will soon begin their offensive. He hopes he'll get planes after that. He's on a visit to Finland currently, and he said this during the course of an address to the press. He said, "Why am I sure that we'll have planes? Because soon we'll have to make our offensive operations, after which I'm sure they'll give us planes. I'd like it to be the other way around, but it is what it is." This is what Zelenskyy said at a press conference in Finland, where he is currently. So, of course, Srinjoy, Zelenskyy not talking about this specific attack on the Kremlin, perhaps for obvious reasons, because Ukraine would want to outrightly deny that there was any attempt of this nature on their part, at least at this premature and preliminary stage, but is hoping for more support from the West as far as the supply of arms and ammunition go.
Undoubtedly, there are two things here. One, that he has said that there is likely to be a counter-offensive. That, of course, has been told 2 times now by the Minister of State of Foreign Affairs of the Ukraine herself. That was a few days ago. This counter-offensive is going to happen. The Ukrainian troops have the required tanks, the British Challenger tanks, the American Abrams tanks, more importantly, the German Leopard tanks, which are more appropriate for the whole process. And they have enough tanks, they have enough artillery, they probably have enough troops. There is a counter-offensive going to happen. Where it will happen, when it will happen, is of course not known. But that counter-offensive is going to happen. The Russians have dug in. They also know that this counter-offensive is happening. The next point really relates to the F-16s. The Ukrainians have asked for F-16s. But President Biden has said, we are not going to give you F-16s. The question is, where else can you get F-16s from? You can get it from many European countries.
Okay, Shinjo, I have to interrupt you because we have another Ukrainian member of parliament, Oleksiy Goncharenko, joining us. Mr. Goncharenko, thank you for speaking to Times Now. How do you respond to the allegation coming from Russia that there was an attempt to directly hit the Kremlin? This was done in the dead of the night, perhaps a possible assassination attempt against the Russian President Vladimir Putin?
First of all, I don't believe Russians. They always lie. So is it truth what they are saying now? I don't believe them. I can't confirm you. I can't deny it. I just don't have information about which attack it was, and really was there any attack. Maybe this is a false flag operation. Everything is possible when we are speaking about Russians. In any way, Ukraine has all the right to attack any objects on Russian territory. That's the fact. Because Russia started unjustified war against our country, and according to international law, we can attack any object anywhere on Russian territory. Also, I can tell you, as Ukrainian member of the parliament and a Ukrainian citizen, I would be happy to see Putin dead. But I don't know, was it a real story? Maybe that was an attempt of coup d'etat in Russia. Maybe, by the way, why it's happening in the night, what Putin was doing in Kremlin in the night. It sounds strange because Kremlin is his office, not a place where he lives in. So I don't know, I don't believe them. But again, it's interesting to see how weak is Russia, that if it's really a kind of attack, so they didn't intervene the drone just only above the main building of Kremlin. It's interesting. They told so many times that they have so strong air defense systems, but it looks like it's not.
And Mr. Goncharenko, the Russians have pledged that they will retaliate at a place and time of their choosing. They believe that this is actually a Ukrainian attempt to send a strong message to the Russians that they can reach the heart of the Russian capital. How do you see the Russian response of a warning of a retaliation once again on Ukraine?
If it is Ukrainian drone, like Russia says, it means that Ukraine can hit the heart of Moscow, exactly. About retaliation. We are not afraid of Russians. They're doing everything they can to kill us, they organize genocide of Ukrainians. They're trying to wipe us out from the planet. So we are not afraid of them. We will win the war. We already made a lot of successful counterattacks, and the whole world will see that this empire, Russian Empire, which started colonial war against Ukraine, they are not really strong. We will win this war. So we are not afraid of any of their retaliations.
And Mr. Gocharenko, why are you not in a position to confirm or deny whether or not this was something that was actually attempted on the part of the Ukrainians? Can we expect the Ukrainian government to respond as to whether or not it was trying to send a message? Because what we're also getting to hear from journalists in Russia is that Mr. Putin was not present at the Kremlin at the time that this attack took place.
Because that is a decision of Ukrainian officials to comment it or not. I'm a member of the parliament.
Okay.
Member of the parliament is not a person from Ministry of Defense. The MIF Ministry of Defense or presidential office will decide to comment, they will comment.
And you've already, of course, claimed that there has been an escalation in this war. You've been at the receiving end of what you describe as a serious invasion of Ukraine. How can the rest of your supporters, the countries that have been standing in solidarity with Ukraine and supplying it with arms and ammunition, do you see any scope for their intervention so far? Because so far, at least, they've held back.
We are very thankful to all our allies for all support we are receiving. This is vital for us, and we are very thankful for them, because this war is not just for Ukrainian independence, not just against Russian Empire, but that's also about international order. If one bigger country can attack their smaller neighbor, that would be a disaster in the world if that will continue this way. So it's very important for the whole world that Ukraine would win this war, and I'm sure that we will win this war.
The world would react, if at all this is a Ukrainian attack on the heart of Moscow? Do you think the world will take very kindly to a direct attack on on an institution that the Russians, of course, hold very close to their heart and believe is sacred?
I didn't understand your question.
My question was, how do you think the world would react? How do you think the world would react to a direct Ukrainian attempt to attack the heart of Moscow?
Ukraine has all rights to attack any object on Russian territory, but I don't know what was it. Maybe that is a false flag operation. Maybe that's a fake operation. Maybe that was attempt of coup d'etat inside Russia. I just don't know. So what will be the reaction of the world? I think that will not be any reaction of the world, because if it's Russians themselves, that's their problem. If it's Ukraine, Ukraine has all the right to do it. So what reaction could be?
Mr. Gocharenko, let me also take this across to strategic expert Abhijit Iyer Mitra, who is with us on the broadcast. Mr. Mitra, Mr. Gocharenko is not ruling out anything so far, but he also speculates that this might have been a false flag operation on the part of the Russians. Do you see any credibility to that kind of a theory?
Moscow has an old Russian trick. Using all kinds of stratagems to create confusion and to really serve a purpose. The thing is, in issues like this, when an attack, be it attack on the parliament, be it, the so-called attack which never materialized on President George W. Bush Sr. In 1993 on his visit to Kuwait. Is proof really required. The scenario has been created and the nation has been treated. Now, assume a Moscow created situation, then the nation has been treated. If this wasn't a situation, it's a Ukraine situation, then I'm sorry to say that, the question is how much more escalate over Russia has already done. But I do think this is where
there is some further escalation that the Russians plan. I don't know what that is.
I really wish my Ukrainian friends the best.
It's unlikely that the Russians will take very kindly to what has happened, even though you might allege that this is some kind of a false flag operation. At least that's what you speculate so far. The Russian journalists that we spoke to on the ground is not willing to believe that theory, and neither are many Russians. Of course, people in the Russian government claiming that this is a direct attack on the part of the Ukrainians. Everyone's talking about an escalation from the Russian side. A further escalation. Is Ukraine really prepared for it?
Look, I'm not speculating. I'm undecided about this. Remember, this is the second attack Last week, there was another attack where a drone with about 17 kilos of explosives, supposedly aimed at the Kremlin. That's what the Russians said. It was aimed at the Kremlin, but some kind of jamming brought it down over a park somewhere in Moscow. Right. Now, the thing is, we don't really know. There will be some kind of forensic investigation. We'll see the origin of the drone, two drones, as I understand it. Let's see where this goes. Because remember, the person does not have to be at a place when the attack is planned. Remember, when the attack on Parliament was planned, the Prime Minister wasn't in there.
That's correct.
But an attack on an institution of the state that is deemed to be a decapitation strike is a very, very serious act that, as per accepted norms, triggers a kind of escalation not normally accepted.
Okay, Mr. Mitra, stay with us. We also have Mr. Fred Wire, Russian expert as well as journalist. Mr. Wire, thank you for speaking to Times Now about this. What's your take on the current situation where there is an allegation being leveled by the Russian side that this was a direct attempt on the part of the Ukrainians to reach the heart of Moscow? There are some reports that also say that this might have been a possible assassination attempt. What's your take on the situation, sir?
Well, I'm sure it's not a false flag. I don't know why the Russians would voluntarily give themselves a black eye, because that's what that looks like. An explosive device penetrating into the walls of the Kremlin. And not only that, but that film shows it hitting the presidential office. The dome there is right above Putin's personal office. So the Russians wouldn't do that to themselves. And the Ukrainians obviously are seeking to, it doesn't have much military significance, but psychologically, I think the goal is to rattle Putin, maybe scare Russians, maybe make them see the war coming home. After all, Ukrainians see that every day. And so it's, in a sense that the Ukrainians are giving payback. I don't know what escalations Russians could do. The only thing I can think of is if they could personally target Zelenskyy. That would be really, really unwise. But I don't see why they would. But otherwise, they are firing everything they've got at Ukraine already. And the Ukrainians are firing back. It's not very much, really. It looks impressive, but Ukrainians are launching, veritable pinpricks in response. So,
okay, Mr. Wire, we'll just come back to you. Please do stay with us because Volodymyr Zelenskyy has been in Helsinki, in Finland, trying to mobilize support towards the Ukrainian cause and seeking the support of many countries sympathetic to the Ukrainian cause in this matter. Let's in fact listen into what he said some time back.
Разів сказав і без будь-яких секретів можу повторити, нам потрібні. Дуже потрібні. Чи будуть вони у нас і чому я вірю, що будуть, я впевнений. Але так відбувається ця війна, що ми повинні постійно довести це на полі бою. Спочатку ми йдемо вперед, показуємо, що за 3 дні нас не можна захопити, потім нам дають якусь зброю. А після цього ми знов йдемо вперед, просимо далекобійну артилерію. Відбувається по-різному. У нас знов є складний успіх, але тим не менш після цього нам дають відповідну зброю. І тому чому я впевнений, що у нас будуть літаки? Тому що скоро у нас будуть наступальні дії. І після них, я впевнений, нам дадуть літаки.
So that was Volodymyr Zelenskyy. In fact, there's more breaking news coming in where Zelensky's press secretary has in fact commented now on the Russian claim about a drone attack on the Kremlin. And just to quote him, he says, "We have no information about the so-called night attacks on the Kremlin, but as President Zelenskyy has repeatedly stated, Ukraine directs all available forces and means to liberate its territories and not attack others. So let me take this back to Mr. Fred Weir, Russian expert and journalist. Mr. Weir, so that was along predictable lines on the part of the Ukrainians, where there appears to be deniability on their part about having had any role in this particular drone attack on the Kremlin.
Yeah, and they do that routinely. You know, when the Crimea bridge explosion happened, they denied any knowledge of it and so on. It's just sort of obvious that it had to be them. But I suppose they do that because their Western sponsors are very leery about attacking Russian territory. And in fact, the most of them, the Americans in particular, have made no secret of it. Not only that, they deny certain types of weapons to Ukraine so as not to tempt them to attack Russian territory. So I guess that's facing west and saying we don't know what happened here. But I can't imagine any other scenario other than a Ukrainian attack, and a very effective one because it hit the presidential palace in the heart of the Kremlin. So I'm sure that's all there is to it.
Mr. Weir, you did say earlier, and you made a very important remark, saying that it would be unwise on the part of the Russians to directly attack the Ukrainian presidential palace, or for that matter, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Do you believe that that kind of an escalation is realistic, or would the Russians actually keep off? How do you read that situation?
That I don't know. I really don't know. I think it would be extremely unwise. And by the way, I think this was unwise too. I think it will not have the effect of striking fear into the heart of Putin or any Russians. I think it'll have the opposite effect. And any attempt to kill Zelenskyy would only have the effect of attracting much more sympathy toward him and his cause. So I think that it's just really unwise to go after leaders. I think Russian media are already saying that it smacks of desperation on the Ukrainian part, but they're simply giving payback for what they perceive the Russians are doing to them. But I don't see how this changes anything.
Mr. Mitra, do you believe that this will change the situation on the ground, with the Ukrainians trying to, of course, project their own strength and say that they're able to reach the heart of Moscow? What kind of a message does that send out, and what does this mean for the ground situation as far as the war is concerned?
Look, leadership targeting is always a escalation. Let's be clear about that, right? Now, and this isn't the time that the Ukrainians have tried in several different ways. They attacked those petrol stations in Belgorod. They're alleged to have assassinated Daria Dugina, the daughter of the so-called Russian philosopher, the philosophical father of Putin, or whatever he's called. I don't know what the latest Western nomenclature for him is. There was also the bombing of the coffee shop, I think 2-3 weeks back, which killed somebody else in St. Petersburg or Moscow, I forget now where. So it's not like the Ukrainians haven't been striking inside Russia. They have. But leadership targeting is always an escalation. The problem now is that the West has basically lost, I won't say lost, but they've exhausted literally everything that they could do to Russia. There is virtually nothing left in the Western stockpile to deter or de-escalate the situation if it escalates from here on. Now, will Putin escalate or not? There have been lots of predictions that Putin was going to escalate here, he was going to escalate there, that, once Bakhmut was wrapped up, there was going to be a new 3-axis invasion from the north and south of Bakhmut and things like that, all of which have not come true.
All right.
The Russian course of action has been quite impossible to predict so far. In all of this. So we don't know where this is going to go, but I don't think the Russians are going to just leave this as it is. Just to add one slight disagreement with Mr. Weir.
Yes.
Which is that, I think the West is also at some kind of an inflection point with Zelenskyy. We've seen the kind of corruption allegations against him, how much money has been pilfered, etc., etc. I don't personally feel that a Russian retaliation, depending on how it's calibrated, will elicit it'll elicit information warfare. But what would that Western sympathy towards him actually translate into in practical terms? I don't really know.
Okay, Mr. Mitra as well as Mr. Vair, please do stay with us. Let me also go across to my colleague Rishabh, who of course tracks the Ministry of External Affairs for his take on what exactly are the deliberations now in the Indian camp with respect to what's been happening in Russia as well as Ukraine. Rishabh, the MEA and the Indian government, at least on this particular conflict, have walked quite a tightrope as far as their stand on this issue is concerned. Tell us about the possible deliberations now within the Ministry of External Affairs over this escalating situation in Russia and Ukraine.
Well, Siddharth, we are here in Goa and SCO happens tomorrow. The foreign ministers meeting for Shanghai Cooperation Organization is scheduled day after, as well as tomorrow. We have India-Russia bilaterals scheduled tomorrow between External Affairs Minister Shankar and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov tomorrow here in Goa. As of now, MEA is very clear. They are monitoring the situation. They do not have much clarity about, given that both the sides have not come out very clear on how things unfolded last night in Kremlin and what were these drone strikes about. These are majorly media reports and a statement from Kremlin. So as of now, MEA is monitoring the situation. There is no official statement from MEA as of now. But definitely, since there is a bilateral talks between India and Russia scheduled tomorrow here in Goa between the foreign ministers of both the countries, this will definitely be discussed there as well. Remember, both Ukraine as well as Russian foreign ministers have been visiting India. As Srinjoy was just mentioning, the first deputy foreign minister of Ukraine was in India only last month, and she discussed things with Secretary West, MOS, MEA, Meenakshi Lekhi, and even spoke at forums here in our national capital. But as of now, India has maintained its neutrality in this war, while West have been after India diplomatically to join the sanctions against Russia, and India has always been saying that India cannot take sides and they are neutral, and right. India's neutrality still appears stagnant, and that's the reason that as of now MEA has not responded to it, and they're just saying we are monitoring it, though within 24 hours we'll have a bilateral between India and Russia.
Well, in fact, do stay on with us. Rishabh, of course, tells us that we are expecting some kind of a briefing in some time. India's in wait and watch mode. But Srinjoy Chaudhary is also joining us, our consulting editor. Srinjoy, I find it very interesting that it has happened at a time when this war has come at a lot of price even for President Putin. You must explain to us, India, especially Prime Minister Modi, was seen as someone who's capable of bringing about peace in the region. Everyone looked up to India's intervention. From here onwards, considering Russia's threatening retaliatory steps, what is India likely to do? Srinjoy. Oh, well, it seems like we've lost that audio connection. Let me go across to Fred Weyer so that I can get a perspective on that. What do we expect, or what is your understanding of the reason, the timing also of this kind of a drone attack, as Russia has claimed, because it is coming, as we were just discussing, at significant costs for Putin as well?
Well, the timing is clear. This is a holiday week in Russia. It started with May Day yesterday, and it ends with May the 9th, which is Victory Day. It is the most important holiday on the Russian calendar, and it features a big military parade right there in Red Square. So I think the Ukrainian plan is to disrupt that Russian feeling, their memory of their great triumph, and so on. I'm sure that is the point of it. What the Russians will do in response is anybody's guess. They are already bombarding Ukraine very heavily, almost, every week. So what more they could do, I don't know.
And that's going to be very interesting. What happens from here onwards? Abhijit Mitra, we've been discussing about how India is currently in wait and watch mode. What's India likely to do from here onwards, given the proximity that it has with Russia as well?
Exactly nothing. We will do nothing. We should be doing nothing. We will give a lot of statements. We will offer a lot of sympathy to different parties involved. We will not condemn anything, and we should not condemn anything, and we will support nobody's position in this, as it indeed should be. So I don't expect India to be doing anything at all in these circumstances. I don't think anybody is holding their breath and seeing how India will react. There was an attempt to, cajole, coerce us, and we were under fierce diplomatic pressure to act against Russia in the first 2-3 months of the war. We refused to do that very successfully, and we have, as time has gone by, Western pressure on us to do anything in this situation has gone down considerably. India's imports of Russian oil and re-exports of that oil are at an all-time high, and even that particular diplomatic nuisance for the West has been weathered quite successfully. So I don't think, this is a situation that particularly concerns us or involves us, and we play it
But
cool for the time
Abhijit,
being.
given that already the Kremlin has warned that there may be retaliatory measures that it is going to resort to, it is quite likely, isn't it, that foreign pressure on Russia to call for peace, to exert more pressure on President Putin, given the relationship that he shares with Prime Minister Modi, to somehow India to actively intervene instead of giving out statements as it has done so far and avoid going in for a vote?
Absolutely. But look, they've accepted the principle that India will not condemn its primary weapons supplier openly. What you might see is a lot of emergency visits to Moscow by high Indian diplomats, and that will be it. There will be no public condemnation because, remember, Russia will say that it was the attacked party, that they have not attempted to kill Zelenskyy or the Ukrainian leadership so far, but the Ukrainian leadership has escalated this by attempting to kill the Russian leadership, and therefore they have just cause and their retaliation is proportionate to that. So, in circumstances like that where the water is muddy, it becomes virtually, unnecessary for India to intervene in this. Remember, every time there is a Pakistani terror attack on India, indeed when Parliament was attacked in 2001, you remember the West was completely non-committal about it.
Absolutely.
So there's absolutely no responsibility on us to, take sides or step up diplomatic pressure or anything of that sort.
Absolutely, and a lot of them are long-standing allies of Pakistan as well as to China, and the misdemeanors of both the countries against India never has evoked that kind of strong response and direct intervention by any of the other countries as well. However, we also have Srinjoy Chaudhary who's joining us, our consulting editor. Srinjoy, very interestingly, one of the Ukrainian officials has said that Kremlin attack suggests that Russia could be preparing for a large-scale terrorist attack against Ukraine in coming days. Essentially, Ukraine seems to be suggesting that this is part of Russia's game plan to escalate the war.
Well, that's very possible. Anything is possible at the moment. First of all, we don't know exactly how Ukraine will react. Because when President Zelenskyy spoke today, he spoke about the counter-offensive that is going to happen. If you remember, the Russian senior minister of state for foreign affairs, the Ukrainian, spoke with Times Now, and she said that a counter-offensive is imminent. Now, where that will happen, when that will happen, we don't know. As far as the reaction to this attack is concerned, first of all, the Russians are making it very clear that they will take action. Now, what kind of action will be taken, we don't know. Number one, will it be an attack, let's say, on the presidential palace in Kiev? We don't know, but that is a possibility. Will it mean more missile attacks on Ukrainian cities like Kiev and Kharkov and so on? We don't know, but that is a possibility. Will it mean an extended, very strong attack on Ukrainian positions in the east before the Ukrainian counteroffensive happens? It's called a spoiling attack. Well, we don't know, but that's possible as well.
Right.
Fourth, there have been some murmurs, some rumors about tactical nuclear attacks, but it's hard to believe that anybody, any person would use a nuclear weapon today. But as far as India's position is concerned, India has made it very clear.
Absolutely.
Told